Today on UPSC History View, India has been shaped over thousands of years by each ruler and dynasty, each one contributing to the culture and heritage of the country by its own terms. Hello and welcome to UPSC History View at UPSC Practice. Today, let's learn about the Rashtrakuta Dynasty. Rashtrakuta was a royal dynasty during large parts of the Indian subcontinent, ruled it between the 6th and 10th centuries. The earliest known Rashtrakuta inscription is a 7th century copper plate grant detailing their rule from Manapura, a city in central or west India. Other ruling Rashtrakuta clans from the same period mentioned in inscriptions were the kings of Achalapur and the rulers of Kannauj. Several controversies exist regarding the origin of these Rashtrakutas, their native homeland and their language. The Elishpur clan was a feudatory of the Badami Chalukyas, and during the rule of Danti Durga, it overthrew Chalukya Kirtivarman II and went on to build an empire with the Gulbarga region in modern-day Karnataka as its base. This clan came to be known as the Rashtrakutas of Manyakheta, rising to the power in South India in 753 AD. At the same time, the Pala dynasty of Bengal and the Pratihara dynasty of Malwa were gaining force in eastern and northwestern India respectively. An Arabic text, Silsilat al-Tawarikh in 851, called the Rashtrakutas one of the four principal empires of the world. This period, between the 8th and the 10th centuries, saw a tripartite struggle for the resources of the rich Gangetic plains, each of these three empires annexing the seat of power at Kannauj for short periods of time. At their peak, the Rashtrakutas of Manyakheta ruled a vast empire stretching from the Ganges River and Yamuna River Doab in the north to Kanyakumari in the south, a fruitful time of political expansion, architectural achievements, and famous literary contributions. The early kings of this dynasty were influenced by Hinduism and the later kings by Jainism. During their rule, Jain mathematicians and scholars contributed important works in Kannada and Sanskrit. Amoghavharsha I, the most famous king of this dynasty, wrote Kaviraja Marga, a landmark literary work in the Kannada language. Architecture reached a milestone in the Dravidian style, the finest example of which is seen in the Kailasanatha temple at Ellora in modern Maharashtra. Other important contributions are the Kashi Vishwanatha temple and the Jain Narayana temple at Pattadakal in modern Karnataka, both of which are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Let's learn about the history of the Rashtrakuta dynasty. The origin of the Rashtrakuta dynasty has been a controversial topic of Indian history. These issues pertain to the origin of the earliest ancestors of the Rashtrakutas during the time of Emperor Ashoka in the 2nd century BCE, and the connection between the several Rashtrakuta dynasties that ruled small kingdoms in northern and central India and the Deccan between the 6th and 7th centuries. The relationship of these medieval Rashtrakutas to the most famous later dynasty, the Rashtrakutas of Manyakheta, that is present-day Malkhed in Gulbarga district, Karnataka state, who ruled between the 8th and 10th centuries, has also been debated. The sources for Rashtrakuta history include medieval inscriptions, ancient literature in the Pali language, contemporaneous literature in Sanskrit and Kannada, and the notes of the Arab travelers. Theories about the dynastic lineage, the native region, and the ancestral home have been proposed, based on information gleaned from inscriptions, royal emblems, the ancient clan names such as Rashtrika, epithets, the names of princes and princesses of the dynasty, and clues from relics such as coins. Scholars debate over which ethnic or linguistic groups can claim the early Rashtrakutas. Possibilities include the northwestern ethnic groups of India, the Kannadiga, Reddy, the Maratha, or the tribes from the Punjab region. Scholars, however, concurred that the rulers of the imperial dynasty in the 8th to 10th century made the Kannada language as important as Sanskrit. Rashtrakuta inscriptions use both Kannada and Sanskrit, and the rulers encouraged literature in both languages. The earliest existing Kannada literary writings are credited to their court poets and royalty. Though these Rashtrakutas were Kannadigas, they were conversant in the northern Deccan language as well. The heart of the Rashtrakuta Empire included nearly all of Karnataka, Maharashtra, and parts of Andhra Pradesh, an area which the Rashtrakutas ruled for over 2 centuries. The Samangand copper coin grant 753 confirms that the feudatory king Danti Durga, who probably ruled from Achalapura in Berar, modern-day Elishpur in Maharashtra, defeated the great Carnatic army, referring to the army of the Badami Chalukyas of Kirtivarman II of Badami in 753, and took control of the northern regions of the Chalukya Empire. He then helped his father-in-law, Pallava king Nandivarman, regain Kanchi from the Chalukyas and defeated the Gurjaras of Malwa and the rulers of Kalinga, Kosala, Srisailam. Dantidurga's successor, Krishna I, brought major portions of present-day Karnataka and Konkan under his control. During the rule of Dhruva Dharavarsha, who took control in 780, the kingdom expanded into an empire that encompassed all of the territory between the Kaveri and central India. He led successful expeditions to Kannauj, the seat of northern Indian power, where he defeated the Gurjara Pratiharas and the Palas of Bengal, gaining him fame and vast booty but not more territory. He also brought the eastern Chalukyas and Gangas of Talakad under his control. According to Altekar and Sen, the Rashtrakutas became a pan-India power during this rule. Let's learn about the expansion of the Rashtrakuta dynasty. The ascent of Dhruva Dharavarsha's third son, Govinda III, to the throne heralded an era of success like never before. There is uncertainty about the location of the early capital of the Rashtrakutas at this time. During his rule, there was a 3-way conflict between the Rashtrakutas, the Palas, and the Pratiharas for control over the Gangetic plains. Describing his victories over the Pratihara Emperor Nagabhatta II and the Pala Emperor Dharmapala, the Sanjan inscription states, "The horses of Govinda III drank from the icy waters of the Himalayan streams, and his war elephants tested the sacred waters of the Ganges." His military exploits have been compared to those of Alexander the Great and Arjuna of Mahabharata. Having conquered Kannauj, he travelled south, took firm hold over Gujarat, Kosala, Gangavadi, humbled the Pallavas of Kanchi, installed a ruler of his choice in Vengi, and received 2 statues as an act of submission from the king of Ceylon. The Cholas, the Pandyas, and the Kongu Cheras of Karur all paid him tribute. As one historian puts it, the drums of the Deccan were heard from the Himalayan caves to the shores of the Malabar coast. The Rashtrakuta Empire now spread over the areas from Cape Comorin to Kannauj and from Benares to Bharuch. The successor of Govinda III, Amoghavharsha I, made Mannakheta his capital and ruled a large empire. Mannakheta remained the Rashtrakutas' regal capital until the end of the empire. He came to the throne in 814, but it was not until 821 that he had suppressed revolts from feudatories and ministers. Amoghavharsha I made peace with the western Ganga dynasty by giving them his 2 daughters in marriage, and then defeated the invading eastern Chalukyas at Vingavalli and assumed the title Viranarayana. His rule was not as militant as that of Govinda III, as he preferred to maintain friendly relations with his neighbors. The Gangas, the eastern Chalukyas, and the Pallavas, with whom he also cultivated marital ties. His era was an enriching one for the arts, literature, and religion. Widely seen as the most famous of the Rashtrakuta emperors, Amoghavharsha I was an accomplished scholar in Kannada and Sanskrit. His Kaviraja Marga is considered an important landmark in Kannada poetics, and Prashnottara Ratnamalika in Sanskrit is a writing of high merit and was later translated into the Tibetan language. Because of his religious temperament, his interest in the arts and literature, and his peace-loving nature, he has been compared to the Emperor Ashoka and called Ashoka of the South. During the rule of Krishna II, the empire faced a revolt from the eastern Chalukyas and its size decreased to the area including most of the western Deccan and Gujarat. Krishna II ended the independent status of the Gujarat branch and brought it under direct control from Mannakheta. Indra III recovered the dynasty's fortunes in central India by defeating the Paramara and then invaded the Doab region of the Ganges and Jamuna rivers. He also defeated the dynasty's traditional enemies, the Pratiharas and the Palas, while maintaining his influence over Vengi. The effect of his victories in Kannauj lasted several years according to the 930 copper plate inscription of Emperor Govinda IV. After a succession of weak kings during whose reigns the emperor lost control of territories in the north and east, Krishna III was the last great ruler who consolidated the empire so that it stretched from the Narmada river to Kaveri river and included the northern Tamil country Tondai Mandalam while levying tribute to the king of Ceylon. Let's learn about the decline of the Rashtrakuta dynasty. In 972 AD, during the rule of Kottiga Amoghavarsha, the Paramara king Siyaka Harsha attacked the empire and plundered Mannakheta, the capital of the Rashtrakutas. This seriously undermined the reputation of the Rashtrakuta empire and consequently led to his downfall. The final decline was sudden as Tailapa II, a feudatory of the Rashtrakuta ruling from Tardavadi province in modern Bijapur district, declared himself independent by taking advantage of this defeat. Indra IV, the last emperor, committed Sallekhana at Shravana Belagola. With the fall of the Rashtrakutas, their feudatories and related clans in the Deccan and northern India declared independence. The western Chalukyas annexed Mannakheta and made it their capital until 1015 and built an impressive empire in the Rashtrakuta heartland during the 11th century. The focus on dominance shifted to the Krishna river, Godavari river, Doab called Vengi. The former feudatories of the Rashtrakutas in western Deccan were brought under control of the Chalukyas, and the hitherto suppressed Cholas of Tanjore became their arch enemies in the south. In conclusion, the rise of Rashtrakutas of Mannakheta had a great impact on India, even on India's north. Sulaiman 851, Al-Masudi 944 and Ibn Khurdabda 912 wrote that their empire was the largest in contemporary India, and Sulaiman further called it one among the four great contemporary empires of the world. According to the travelogues of the Arabs Al-Masudi and Ibn Khurdidbi of the 10th century, most of the kings in Hindustan turned their faces towards the Rashtrakuta king while they were praying, and they prostrated themselves before his ambassadors. The Rashtrakuta king was known as the King of Kings, Rajadhiraja, who possessed the mightiest of armies and whose domains extended from Konkan to Sindh. Some historians have called these times as an age of imperial Kannauj. Since the Rashtrakuta successfully captured Kannauj, levied tribute on its rulers, and presented themselves as masters of North India, the era could also be called the age of imperial Karnataka. During their political expansion into central and northern India in the 8th to 10th centuries, the Rashtrakutas or their relatives created several kingdoms that either ruled during the reign of the parent empire or continued to rule for centuries after its fall or came to power much later. Well known among these were the Rashtrakutas of Gujarat 757 to 888, the Rattas of Saundatti 875 to 1230 in modern Karnataka, the Gandhavalas of Kannauj 1068 to 1223, the Rashtrakutas of Rajasthan known as Rajputana and ruling from Hastikundi or Hatundi 893 to 996, the Hal near Jabalpur, Rathors of Mandor near Jodhpur, the Rathors of Dhanop, Rashtrakuta Dynasty of Mayuragiri in modern Maharashtra, and Rashtrakutas of Kannauj. Rajadhiraja Chola's conquest of the island of Ceylon in the early 11th century CE led to the fall of 4 kings there. According to historian K. Pillai, one of them, King Madhavaraja of the Jaffna kingdom, was an usurper from the Rashtrakuta dynasty. Thank you very much for listening to the overview of the Rashtrakuta dynasty, their region, their expansion, and their decline. For more such articles and discussions, get the UPSC Practice app from the App Store.